Behind my back, I'm holding the most adorable COB light you've probably ever seen. Thankfully, it's more than just cute. It's actually a pretty solid little light. Let's get undone.
Gerald Undone. He's crazy.
What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and pitter patter, let's get at her. So this is the Sokani X60. Now, if you remember back before the influx of mini RGB panels took over the market last year, I recommended Sokani's X21 as a nice little affordable mini LED light. I was impressed by the quality and output for the price point, and the same is true for the X60 here. This light is only $169, but offers 2/3 of the output of Aputure's 120D Mark II. So that's a pretty solid value proposition for a lux to dollar ratio. Now, don't get me wrong, this can't really compete with the 120D for a few reasons, but I definitely feel it could fill a need at a much lower price point than the more premium competition. But first, let's start with all the ways it's not a 120D Mark II killer. First of all, it's louder. The fan doesn't have the auto control function that the Aputure has, and it's much smaller. Smaller fans are louder, and this one is always on and always loud. It does move an impressive amount of air though, and the design of the chassis and heatsink is clever and conducive to airflow despite its small form factor. But you're not going to get it any quieter unless you swap out that fan for a bigger one. Secondly, out of the box, it's an AC mains light only, so no battery power for portability. But I suppose if you're already in the middle of modding out a new fan, you could probably rig up a V-mount plate for it. The AC adapter is rated for 15 volts at 6 amps, so that's doable for V-mount, and the light takes a standard DC plug, so it would actually be pretty easy to adapt. Speaking of that power brick though, I've got good and bad things to say about it. First, I like that they use the ubiquitous figure 8 style for the power cord, and the one that they provide has a decent length of about 9 to 10 feet, or right around 3 meters, but they committed the increasingly common sin of keeping the cable from the adapter to the light too short so that it hangs off the ground. I wish companies would stop doing this and make these portions at least 3 to 4 meters long as well, so that we can use this on tall light stands or C-stands without having a dirty dangler. On the wall side, it uses an ungrounded connection with a prong design I've never seen before. Perhaps this is a common design from a different part of the world, but to me this looks like something your Uncle Leroy whipped up in his workshop when the Christmas lights wouldn't stay plugged in. Despite my design complaints with the power cable, however, the light works just fine. It has a satisfying on-off switch, nice tactile controls, and a sizable display. You can adjust the brightness from 1% to 100% in 1% increments, and you'll get a healthy 3000 lux at 1 meter without the reflector on. For comparison, the Aputure 120D Mark II gave me 5800 lux in the same scenario. The 120D Mark II did measure a bit closer to its 5600 Kelvin target at 5830, where the Sokani was coming in at around 6000 Kelvin. So it's a tad cooler, but it still produces nice, accurate renditions with a CRI of 96.9 versus the Aputure's 95.8. These numbers are somewhat arbitrary though, so I'll put it on as my key light in a moment for you to look at my skin tone and temperature shifting. One thing it has in common with the latest Aputure lights like the 300D Mark II and the revised 120D Mark II is the new reflector design that gives a massive boost to output. The Sokani seems to have taken notes from Aputure here, and not only is the reflector well made and rugged, but it'll boost your output at 1 meter from 3000 lux to 15,500 lux. And the integrity of that light seems solid. I went through a range of frame rates, shutter speeds, and brightness settings and found no flicker or abnormalities, and it was able to sustain long periods at 100% power. It's not bicolor and doesn't have RGB, but it does have a few standard effects: paparazzi, faulty bulb, lightning, TV, and fireworks. You can adjust the intensity and the frequency, and they work fine. Nothing spectacular, but they're there if you need them. Now, I think we can all agree that this is the cutest COB light available, but the included remote, on the other hand, is definitely not cute. Why is it so big? I mean, seriously, this is the Pixel 3 XL and this is the Aputure remote. Now look at this Sokani remote. It's hilarious. It looks like the remote control from something that plays both DVDs and VHS, but all it really does is control the brightness and effects. Because that's something you should know. The only way to turn this light off is by flicking this big power supply switch, which of course completely kills the power and renders the remote useless. The most you can do with the remote is to turn the light down to 1%, but you can't turn it off completely. So that makes you wonder what the on-off button on the remote is for. It's for turning the remote on. The remote has its own power button. But seriously, this thing is hilarious. The contours on the back are straight out of 1991, and the buttons are comically loud. The screen on it is thoughtful though. The display on the light itself is on the back, where you likely won't be able to see it while filming yourself. So this screen here lets you know what brightness you're set to while in front of the camera. I appreciated this. The light also has two mounting options for modifiers. It's got a Bowens mount on the front, And then the yoke, which is solid metal by the way, also has an umbrella holder. This is a great inclusion because if you were going to go for a really budget setup, you can get this light for just $169 and then pick up a cheap umbrella for way less than your typical Bowens modifier, and you can have a surprisingly powerful soft light for under $200. And you could even combine the reflector with the umbrella if you wanted significantly more output with a moderate amount of diffusion without taking up a huge footprint. There are two limitations of this though that you should be aware of. First, the umbrella can't be tilted since it's only the light that tilts and not the yoke. So this won't work if you're shooting from way up high and is better suited for mid-level shots. And secondly, while the yoke is quite sturdy, just like the earlier Aperture lights, the tilt lock is not. It doesn't have the same strength of the newer handbrakes that Aperture is using on their lights now, which means if you put a Light Dome 2 on here, it'll sag. Quite significantly actually. So that option only really works if you want the light tilted down because it just can't support giant modifiers. You do get a nice bump in lock strength if you add a washer between the yoke and the light, which should allow for anything mid-size and below to hold nicely, like the Light Dome Mini, those GODOX softboxes or larger reflectors, but you'll only be able to use large modifiers like the Light Dome 2 or the Aperture lantern in a top-down configuration, unless you're okay with a massive downward tilt. I do wish they had built in a stronger handbrake as it would make this light even better value than it currently is, but I suppose that's why they included the umbrella holder to compensate for that shortcoming. Of course, an umbrella isn't going to produce the same look as a nice parabolic softbox like Aperture's Light Dome, but it looks pretty darn good for a sub $200 combo. And for that money, you also get this bag, which is well laid out and nicely padded. Like most things I've tested from Sokani, you're getting better quality here than you'd expect for the price, and this bag is no exception. Alright, now give me a couple minutes to set up a few different light configurations so you can see some side-by-sides, and then we'll wrap up this video. Now the obvious comparisons here would be to the GODOX SL-60W and the GVM 80W, both of which are cheaper. All three of these lights are viable options, but the GODOX isn't quite as powerful and doesn't have quite as accurate color while suffering from the same issues like fan noise. It also doesn't have as refined power adjustments. It does have a larger handbrake, which is good, but the yoke is plastic, which I don't like. However, I do like that the umbrella holder on the GODOX tilts with the light. So it's a structurally weaker design, but a more useful one, and it comes in at $134. The GVM is pretty similar to the GODOX, but in my experience, GVM lights typically have quirks with their output. I haven't used this light personally, so I shouldn't comment much, but I have used a lot of their other lights. In fact, I'm using one of them right now, and usually they have power jumps and uneven distribution of output. And most of the lights I've gotten from GVM usually come packaged weirdly with minor dings and scratches. They're good for cheap, but I typically only buy them when they're the best price available, which in this case they are at only $120 for the 80-watt version. The overall construction of the GVM is plastic though, so I'd worry about its longevity if you need a light that can take a beating. So I think the best bang for the buck might still be the Sokani X60. I just wish it had a stronger handbrake and tilting umbrella, but the all-metal construction, outstanding reflector, as well as the quality and integrity of its output make it a winner. This is a great option for somebody on a budget, or if you're just looking to add another light into your kit, but don't need a premium light to fit that role. The only real consideration you need to make is if portability via battery power is important to you, or if you'll be using it in a quiet environment close to your microphone. If you need either of those two things, then none of these three lights I just compared will be a good fit without modification, because they all have those shortcomings. But to give you a better sense of the fan noise, in this shot here I have the mic placed just out of frame, and the light is placed about 6 feet or 2 meters away behind the light dome. And this is what it sounds like. I'll turn the light on and off so you can pick out which noise is coming from that fan. So if the mains power only and noisier than average fan limitations aren't concerns for your purpose, then I'd say the Sokani X60 is a great choice and one of the best value options available. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video entertaining, or at least helpful, and if you did, make sure to leave it the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, then you must be friends with my Uncle Leroy. Yeah, alright. I'm done.